I've been a truck driver for almost 15 years now. I've seen a lot on the road. Broken down rigs, ghost lights out in the desert, even a few things I still can't explain. But what happened to me one freezing night in Utah, that's the one story I still can't shake off. I was 35 then, hauling freight from Reno to Salt Lake City in the middle of winter. The highway was a sheet of black ice. Wind howled across the open plains, rocking my rig as snow whipped across the windshield. My CB radio had gone quiet hours ago. No chatter, no voices, nothing. Just the hum of the engine and the faint hiss of static. By the time it hit 3 a.m., I was running low on fuel and starting to feel that strange, hollow tiredness only truckers understand, where your body's awake but your brain starts to drift in and out. I knew I had to stop soon or risk falling asleep behind the wheel. Then, out of the white blur ahead, I saw the warm glow of a neon sign cutting through the storm. It read, Wendover Diner and Gas. The letters flickered faintly, but it was enough for me to sigh of relief. I hadn't seen a sign of life for nearly 100 miles. I pulled off the highway, crunching over packed snow, and rolled up to a small, old-fashioned truck stop. It looked like something out of the 1970s. 2 gas pumps, a faded red canopy, and an old jukebox by the window. I killed the engine, grabbed my wallet, and stepped out into the cold. The air was sharp enough to burn your lungs. When I walked inside, a bell over the door jingled softly. The warmth hit me first, then the smell, fresh coffee and something frying on the griddle. Behind the counter stood an older man, maybe in his early 60s, wearing a faded blue flannel and a name tag that said Lou. "Cold night, ain't it?" he said, smiling as he wiped down the counter. "Colder than a grave," I joked, stomping my boots. "Didn't think anyone would be open out here." Lou chuckled, poured me a steaming cup of coffee, and slid it across the counter. "Wendover Diner is always open. Been here longer than most of the roads around." We talked for a bit. He told me about how the storms get worse every winter, how truckers sometimes get stranded for days. I told him about my route, and he nodded knowingly, like he'd heard 1,000 stories like mine. When I went to pay for my coffee and fuel, he waved me off. "On the house," he said. "Road looks rough tonight. You take it slow, all right?" Something about the way he said it, soft, almost fatherly, stuck with me. I thanked him, stepped back into the freezing air, and topped off my tank. Before I left, I looked back toward the diner. Lou was standing in the doorway, one hand raised in a little wave. Behind him, the warm yellow light made him look almost ghostly against the snow. I drove off, headlights cutting through the darkness. The next morning, I stopped at a trucker's rest area outside Salt Lake. A few guys were sitting around drinking coffee, swapping road stories. I mentioned how bad the weather had been and said I was lucky to find that Wendover Diner and Gas open in the middle of nowhere. That's when the table went dead quiet. One of the older drivers, a guy named Rick, with gray stubble and a tired face, set his mug down slow. "You said Wendover Diner?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, feeling everyone's eyes on me. "Off Route 93, just before the state line." He shook his head. "That place hasn't been there for decades, son." I laughed a little, thinking he was joking. "Nah, I was just there last night. Old guy named Lou runs the counter." Rick stared at me for a long moment, then leaned in closer. "Wendover Diner burned down back in the 80s.
A gas leak took the whole place down. The man who owned it, his name was Lou. The room went completely silent. I felt my stomach turn. You're saying it burned down? Yeah, Rick said. A few drivers swore they saw lights out there long after it was gone. Locals said Lou never left. He used to help stranded truckers, kept that diner open all hours. Some say he still does. I tried to laugh it off, but something inside me went cold. When I checked my dashboard later, my fuel gauge was still full, more than it should have been, considering how far I'd driven. And on the passenger seat was the coffee cup Lou had handed me. Except now it was cracked down the side, blackened like it had been through fire. That night, I drove back along the same route. I slowed down when I reached the stretch where the diner should have been. There was nothing. Just an empty clearing buried under snow, a few charred wooden posts poking out of the ground, and the faint outline of what used to be a gas station foundation. I sat there for a long time, engine idling, staring at the spot where Lou had stood waving goodbye. And for a split second, I could have sworn I saw that same flicker of neon red through the storm, Wendover Diner and gas, just barely visible before it faded again into darkness. Even now, years later, I still think about that night. About Lou. Maybe it was a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and the snow. Or maybe some places and some people don't move on the way the rest of us do. So if you ever find yourself driving through Utah on a cold winter night and you see a flicker of neon light through the storm, maybe don't stop. Or if you do, tell Lou I said thanks for the coffee.
Jack Mercer had been driving trucks for 22 years, and he thought he'd seen it all. Blizzards in Ohio, deer leaping across highways in Montana, even the occasional drunk driver swerving dangerously close to his rig. But nothing compared to that night in Pennsylvania. It was a late run, past midnight, and he was hauling an empty trailer back toward Harrisburg after dropping a load earlier in the day. The road should have been comforting. Long stretches of familiar blacktop, the same radio chatter, the same hum of his 18-wheeler carrying him through the woods. But from the moment Jack merged onto Route 80, something felt wrong. The first thing he noticed was how silent everything was. No cars passed him. No trucks appeared in his mirrors. Just miles of dark trees pressing close to the road, their tops swallowed in mist. Even the radio, usually buzzing with stations or faint static, struggled to pick up anything more than a whisper of sound. He checked the dashboard clock, 12:17 a.m. A bad hour, he thought. The hour when truckers pulled over to nap, when cops slowed their patrols, when the night seemed to hold its breath. Jack reached for his thermos, sipping lukewarm coffee, and muttered, "Couple more hours, then I'll call it a night." He slapped his cheek to stay alert and drummed his fingers on the wheel. That's when he saw it. Up ahead, through the curling fog, a faint yellow glow flickered. Not headlights, not a gas station. The glow was too steady, too unnatural. As he drew closer, the outline sharpened into something small, square, and impossibly out of place. A toll booth. Jack frowned. He knew this route like the back of his hand. There wasn't supposed to be a toll here. The nearest one was miles away. Still, the booth stood square in the center of the highway, its glass windows glowing with the dim, sickly yellow of a dying fluorescent bulb. Jack slowed the rig, suspicion crawling into his stomach. He rolled down his window as the booth's glass slid open with a soft hiss. A pale hand extended outward. No words, no greeting, just a hand waiting. Jack hesitated, then dug into his wallet and pulled out a $5 bill. "Guess I missed a new one," he muttered, passing it forward. The attendant, a gaunt man with hollow eyes and gray skin, took the bill. He stared at Jack for several seconds too long, lips pressed together, before sliding the glass shut again. Jack exhaled hard, shifted gears, and drove on, but his gut twisted with unease. The man hadn't just been silent, he had been watching, and his eyes weren't just empty, they were hungry. As the yellow blow disappeared into his mirrors, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't just paid money, he had lost something else. Something he might never get back.
Jack Mercer had driven another 20 miles before his heartbeat finally slowed. He told himself it was nothing. Some backroad toll the state had quietly installed, maybe. Pennsylvania was full of surprises, after all. Still, a sour taste lingered in his mouth, and no matter how many times he adjusted in his seat, he couldn't shake the weight pressing down on his chest. He rubbed his tired eyes and let out a shaky laugh. "Get it together, Mercer. You're just tired." The road stretched on, dark and endless. The fog thickened until the beams of his headlights struggled to cut through. The forest closed in tighter, each tree trunk blending into the next until they looked like a wall of black. He turned the radio dial, hoping for a human voice, a weather update, even a late-night preacher, but all he got was static. Then Jack saw it. At first it was faint, a glow barely visible through the curtain of fog, but his gut clenched instantly, that same dim yellow light. He gripped the wheel, shaking his head in disbelief. No way, no damn way. His rig slowed almost against his will. The glow sharpened into shape, a small square structure, a booth, the same booth. Jack's pulse spiked, his throat drying up, his chest felt tight, like the air had turned heavier. He rolled down his window again, this time staring hard. The booth was identical. Same yellow bulb flickering overhead, same grime on the glass, and as the window slid open with that same mechanical hiss, a pale hand emerged, exactly as before. Jack's voice cracked when he called out, "Hey, didn't I just pay you back there?" No answer. The hand stayed outstretched, still, patient. Jack's grip on the wheel tightened until his knuckles went white. He could feel sweat bead across his forehead despite the chill in the cab. He reached into his wallet with shaky fingers, pulled out another bill, and shoved it into the waiting hand. The attendant accepted it, silently, staring at him with eyes that seemed darker now, deeper. For a second he thought he saw something flicker inside those eyes. Not reflection, not movement, something else. Something alive. The glass slid shut. The booth remained behind him. As Jack drove away, his chest hammered with realization. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a new toll. Something was happening, something impossible, and he wasn't sure he'd ever get out.
By the time Jack reached the third booth, his body was trembling. His hands shook on the wheel, and every nerve screamed that something was horribly wrong. He knew these roads. He knew Pennsylvania's highways like the lines on his palms, but the glow ahead wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't some mistake on the map. It was waiting for him. Jack slammed his hand against the steering wheel. No, this isn't real. But his headlights picked it out clearly in the fog. The booth, square and steady, glowing with that same dim yellow light. This time, Jack refused to slow down. He pressed his foot harder on the accelerator, the engine growling as his rig barreled forward. His chest heaved with adrenaline. I'll blow right through it. But the booth didn't vanish. It didn't shrink away. It grew closer, larger, more solid with every passing second. And just as he thought he would smash through it, the fog thickened to an almost blinding white. His vision failed. Reflex forced him to slam the brakes, tires shrieking against the asphalt. The rig shuddered to a halt. The booth stood unbroken before him. The window slid open. The pale hand extended. His pulse hammered so loudly he could barely hear himself think. He leaned out the window, sweat dripping down his temple. "What the hell are you? Huh? What do you want from me?" His voice cracked into a desperate scream. The attendant's face tilted closer to the glass. Those hollow, sunken eyes met Jack's directly for the first time. Jack swore he saw movement inside them, a swirling darkness like smoke or shadows pulling at the edges of his vision. "Say something! Just say something!" Jack roared, slamming his fist against the wheel. But the figure didn't answer. The hand just stayed there, waiting. Jack cursed, yanked a bill from his thinning wallet and shoved it forward with trembling fingers. The attendant took it slowly, eyes never blinking, never breaking their stare. The window slid shut. But this time he heard it, a whisper, faint as wind cutting through a crack in the glass. "More." Jack's stomach dropped. His vision swam. He pressed the gas, tearing away into the fog, but that single word rattled inside his skull like broken glass. More. It wasn't just taking his money. It wanted more. By the time Jack saw the fourth booth, something inside him cracked. His wallet was nearly empty, his throat burned from shouting, and his body didn't feel right anymore. He caught his reflection in the windshield, illuminated faintly by the dashboard lights. His skin was paler than it should have been. His beard looked thicker, grayer, and the bags under his eyes weren't from exhaustion alone. They looked like they belonged to a man 20 years older. Jack gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands. "It's taking something from me," he whispered to himself. "It's not just money, it's taking time." He pressed harder on the gas, trying to outrun whatever curse had latched onto him. He veered onto an exit ramp, then onto winding back roads, headlights cutting across fields and clusters of leaning barns. He thought he had escaped. For a few blissful minutes, there was nothing but empty road and the roar of the engine. Then, the glow returned. The booth stood at the crest of a hill, its yellow bulb flickering like a dying star, waiting, always waiting. Jack slammed the brakes so hard the rig fishtailed. He staggered out of the cab, stumbling toward the booth on shaking legs. His fists pounded against the glass. "You bastard! What do you want from me?" His voice broke into raw desperation. The attendant's face leaned forward, those hollow eyes pulling Jack in like a void, and for the first time, the figure's lips cracked in the faintest movement, almost a smile, almost not. The window slid open, the pale hand extended. Jack dug through his pockets. He pulled out coins, his old brass lighter, even the watch his father had given him when he first started trucking. He shoved them all into the hand, one after another. Take it, just let me go." The attendant accepted each offering silently, slowly, until Jack had nothing left. His pockets were empty, his wallet bare.
But Jack didn't feel lighter. He felt hollow. His knees buckled as if the strength had been sucked right out of him. His vision blurred, and when he caught another glimpse of himself in the booth's grimy glass, he staggered back in horror. His hair was gray, his skin sagged. His reflection was not the 48-year-old trucker who had started this trip, but a man pushing 70. It hit him all at once. The booth wasn't feeding on his money. It was feeding on him, his years, his life. And no matter what he gave, it would never be enough.
Jack stumbled back toward his rig, his chest heaving, his knees threatening to give out beneath him. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though chains were dragging behind him, invisible but unbreakable. His reflection in the booth's glass still haunted him. Gray hair, sunken eyes, skin like paper. He had lost decades in minutes. He climbed into the cab, hands trembling as he gripped the wheel. He wanted to drive, to flee, to leave that cursed strip of road behind him forever. But deep down he knew there was no escape. The toll would always find him. The truck roared forward, gears grinding. The road stretched endlessly, dark fields swallowing everything in the distance. His headlights cut through the fog, but the more he drove, the less it seemed like he was moving. And then, there it was again. Another booth, its flickering yellow light like the heartbeat of something ancient and hungry. Jack slammed on the brakes, the rig shuddering violently, tires screaming against the asphalt. His body lurched forward, bones aching. He could feel the years continuing to peel away from him, every second costing him more than he could bear. He stepped out, this time barely able to stand. His back bent, his breath ragged. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Please, please no more." The glass window slid open with that same slow, inevitable scrape. The attendant was waiting, silent, unmoving, a pale hand extended once again. "I don't have anything left," Jack said. His wallet lay empty in the cab, his pockets were bare, his body itself felt spent, drained of all but the last flicker of life. And then he understood. The toll was never about money, not trinkets, not even years. It was about the final payment. Him. Jack let out one last broken laugh, a sound somewhere between a sob and surrender. His hand reached forward, trembling, wrinkled, shaking as though it belonged to a man twice his age. He placed it in the attendant's palm. The booth light flared. The night swallowed the road in a sudden, absolute black. When the light flickered back on, the truck sat idling, empty. The booth's glass was dark. The road was silent. And if you ever find yourself driving a lonely stretch of highway at night, and you see a toll booth glowing in the fog where no toll should be, don't stop. Because if you do, you'll pay too. I still remember that night like it happened yesterday. I was 38 years old, hauling a load through rural Nevada. Nothing but open desert, dead air, and miles of highway most people never drive after dark. It was 2:40 in the morning when it happened. I'd been staring at the road for so long the yellow lines almost felt like they were stretching toward me. The only sound inside the cab was the steady hum of the engine and the faint rattle of the trailer behind me. And then I heard it. A voice. A whisper. Coming from directly behind my seat.
It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't loud, just close. "Don't stop here." I froze. My hands tightened around the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. For a second, I thought maybe someone had climbed into my cab while I was fueling back in Elko. But the voice, it didn't sound like a living person. It sounded too close, too calm, too cold. I jerked my head over my shoulder. Nothing. Just my empty sleeper bunk. Dark, still, silent. Yet somehow, I knew that whisper wasn't my imagination. Something was in the truck with me, and it didn't want me to stop. I kept driving, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I was just tired. Long hauls do that to you. They pull tricks on your mind. But the more I thought about the voice, the more uneasy I felt. 10 minutes later, I approached a stretch of road I'd never liked, mile marker 117. The wind always died there. Every time I passed it, the air went still, like the desert itself was holding its breath. And tonight, as I got closer, the silence grew heavier. I noticed something ahead. 2 cars parked on the shoulder, no hazards blinking. That's usually a bad sign for truckers. I slowed slightly, wondering if somebody needed help. That's when I heard it again, right behind my ear this time. A whisper so soft it felt like breath against my skin. "Don't stop." I slammed my foot back on the accelerator. Whatever was happening there, whatever those cars were, it wasn't something I needed to be part of. As I passed, I glanced in the mirror. Both cars shifted, not like someone got inside, more like someone hiding between them had moved. I didn't stop to think twice. I just drove.
My CB radio had been dead silent all night, but the second I passed the cars, the static changed. It wasn't normal interference. This sounded like breathing, slow, steady, almost matching mine. I turned the volume down and kept my eyes on the road. A few miles later, my GPS suddenly froze. Blue screen, no signal. Then my truck's headlights flickered. Not off, just a quick dimming like something passed in front of them. My heart was racing now. I've driven all 48 states. I've handled blizzards, sandstorms, and everything in between. But nothing prepares you for the feeling that you are not alone inside your own cab. The air behind me felt heavier, warmer, like someone invisible was lunging closer, trying to speak again. But it didn't. Only silence. And that silence was somehow worse. By the time dawn started breaking, I was exhausted. I pulled into a rest stop near Wells, Nevada, got coffee, and sat down at a counter seat inside the small diner. A couple local truckers were talking near me. One of them said, "You hear about that mess back on 80 last night, near mile marker 117? My head snapped up. "What happened?" I asked. He sighed. "Attempted robbery. 2 cars pulled over a semi. They tried to box the driver in. Guy stopped, and they dragged him out. Took everything. Beat him up pretty bad." My stomach dropped. "What time?" I asked quietly. The trucker shrugged. "Around 2:45 in the morning." 2:45. 5 minutes after I passed that spot. 5 minutes after the whisper told me not to stop. I felt the hairs rise on the back of my neck. I knew exactly what had saved me. And it wasn't luck.